Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary.
Releases Pope Francis's wildly anticipated encyclical on the environment.
Late today, the leader of the world's 1.2 billion Catholics.
His first time ever on U.S. soil.
God bless America.
Apocalyptic views in Southern California has everyone looking for answers as fires continue to burn.
This is like Mars, the moon, Armageddon, climate change. I mean, something's going on here. It's absolutely, utterly insane.
But with each passing year, as fewer of us attend religious services regularly, we're losing our places of worship.
There you have it. Let's make America pray again. Let's make America pray again. Let's make America pray again. God bless you, and God bless the USA.
It's going to bring back the churchgoer. It's going to bring back the churchgoer. It's going to bring back the churchgoer. I mean, you have to see. I don't like the charts when I see charts where they're going in the wrong direction. We don't like that.
3 times the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Sunday Bluelaws in the 1960s. Why? Because of the rest.
The decline in church attendance points to a major change in American civic life and engagement. Increasingly, in many Americans' minds, religion equals the religious right, or equals the Republican Party, or maybe equals support for Donald Trump. And if that's what religion is, for many people, they don't want any part of religion. Religions have regarded this ritual rest as a spiritual necessity. Yet clergy are now arguing that this practice, whether in a secular or religious context, can help redirect the world's societies away from catastrophic climate change. Lawmakers consider bill to bring back Bluelaws. The minds of men are agitated over the question of Sunday legislation and of the teaching of religion in the public schools. We will not leave any stone unturned. There is so much more to say to you. Let's watch America Sunday. What will be your choice? America is reclaiming the day of the sun.
We often turn to religion in times of great joy, a birth, a communion, or perhaps a wedding, and also in times of suffering, a death, or national tragedy. But with each passing year, as fewer of us attend religious services regularly, we're losing our places of worship. Our Steve Osinsami has this report on how churches are coping with the changing times and what they're doing to try to keep their doors open.
These are prayerful days for the faithful who used to raise their hearts and minds to heaven and filled the pews in this house of God in Buffalo, New York. This is where neighborhood children learned to sing, where people were married and buried. And what hurts is that after more than a century of worship, this working-class neighborhood on the other side of these stained glass windows is losing something they might miss. This was their final Mass at the All Saints Parish on a warm Sunday in July. And this was the few who came. As empty as it was still many more than they've seen at any service here in years. The priests are encouraging them to take comfort in Holy Scripture that says for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. Here on earth, they had no choice but to sell.
How many churches have you had to close in the last few years?
We closed a number of places. We essentially went to half of what we used to back in the early 2000s.
Wait, you went to half?
Roughly. We lost about 100 parishes.
And we're talking about buildings that are as big as this one.
Not all of them, but yes.
Father Brian Zielinski is one of many religious leaders across America who's had to stand before cameras this year, closing houses of worship. He expects he'll need to shut down another 70 churches and what they're calling their road to renewal, a very biblical name for a modern problem. But it's simple, really. People just aren't going to church as much. On average, more than half of their churches today are baptizing fewer than one person a month, and 59% of them are spending more than they take in.
It's my job and role to not just pray about the situation, but to then look at the hard data and say, where does the church need to move?
And it's not just here, of course.
Correct.
It's not just Buffalo. It's not just New York.
Correct.
It's not just America. What's happening?
My personal opinion is simply that, we've become a culture that doesn't need God as much as we think we do.
It's a trend that in religious circles has become an alarm that people around the world are losing their spiritual faith, mostly because of their busy lives. Americans are certainly nowhere near as devout as the Pilgrims who landed with their Bibles on Plymouth Rock and founded the country. And when you fast forward to the late 1940s, nearly 80% would tell you that they belong to a church, synagogue, mosque, or temple. Today, just 45% say the same, and only 32% say that they worship God in a house of prayer once a week.
We're living in a church that was predicated on the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that we had tons of priests, tons of nuns, tons of Catholics.
Timothy Cardinal Dolan is the Archbishop of New York.
Huge, cohesive Catholic families that were having 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 kids, all in these concentrated, cohesive neighborhoods. Those days are over. We can long for them, we can grieve that they're past, but there's no use crying over that spilt milk. It's gone, okay? And so we got to live with that.
Cardinal Dolan is the one who ultimately decided which churches closed and which did not.
I have sinned against you.
In survey and polls, the people who are leaving their churches say that the never-ending sins of religious leaders aren't helping. The child abuse scandals and the long list of ministers who failed to practice what they preach.
Coming to you from Praise the Lord Studios in Charlotte, North Carolina.
In the movies, like The Eyes of Tammy Faye Baker,
The Jim and Tammy Show.
Hollywood has helped turn some of religion's most famous ministers into disappointing jokes.
Tammy and I are undergoing the most vicious attacks.
The good pastors out there say it shouldn't be any surprise then that collection plates are light, and that starting in 2019, a year before the pandemic, America was losing as many as 1,000 churches a year.
All Americans need a Bible in their home, and I have many. It's my favorite book. It's a lot of people's favorite book. This Bible is a reminder that the biggest thing we have to bring back America and to make America great again is our religion. Religion is so important. It's so missing, but it's going to come back, and it's going to come back strong, just like our country is going to come back strong.
It's a nation in which you are free to be Christian. Article 11 of the treaty stated, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religious or tranquility of Muslims, and as the said states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mohammedan nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. John Adams submitted and signed the Treaty of Tripoli, 1797.
Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Mr. President, these are your people. Give him a great big hand. The President of the United States, Mr. President.
Please sit down. I've been called a lot of things, but nobody's called me a bishop yet.
To say it,
I'm Presbyterian. Can you believe it? Nobody believes I'm Presbyterian. I'm Presbyterian. I'm Presbyterian. I'm Presbyterian. Boy, that's down the middle of the road, folks, in all fairness. I mean, Seventh-day Adventist, I don't know about.
Good evening. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it.
Come on, the power of the Lord is here. Feel it in the atmosphere. Yeah, the power of the Lord. Is here. Come on, everybody's on the trumpet. Let's go.
Some of you bring politics into the church. You think that politics is spiritual stuff. Politics is of this world. You think it's your duty to be political about this, that, and the other. No, your duty is to serve the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, body, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Don't be talking to me about my spiritual responsibility to vote. I don't have a spiritual responsibility to vote. I have a civic privilege. Don't be telling me that voting is spiritual. See, that's what happens when you don't read and pray. When you don't read and pray, you say, wow, there's a Bible out now that includes the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Isn't that wonderful? No.
But what is the image to the beast? And how is it to be formed? The image is made by the two-horned beast and is an image to the beast. It is also called an image of the beast. Then to learn what the image is like and how it is to be formed, we must study the characteristics of the beast itself, the papacy. When the early church became corrupted by departing from the simplicity of the gospel and accepting heathen rites and customs, she lost the spirit and power of God, and in order to control the consciences of the people, she sought the support of the secular power. The result was the papacy, a church that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends, especially for the punishment of heresy. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Revelation 13 verses 11 to 12.
Many Bible believers today have followed tradition handed down by previous generations. They believe and were taught that Sunday is the proper day of worship, that the Savior changed the day of worship from the Jewish Sabbath to Sunday. The adoption of Sunday as the Christian Sabbath has little to do with the Bible and everything to do with Constantine the Great over 300 years after the Messiah's death. Constantine was emperor of the Roman Empire from 306 to 337 CE. He was a sun worshipper who on his deathbed converted to Christianity. In 321 CE, while still a sun worshipper, Constantine established Sunday as the day of worship. He decreed,
"On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all workshops be closed."
In this coin circulated by Constantine in 317 CE, we see the face of Constantine on one side, and on the other the figure of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The sun god was also known as Mithras, and his birth was on December 25th. This date was adopted as the birth of Christ and became the date for Christmas many centuries later.
By the way, what they were doing to religious liberty, they were destroying religious liberty. You will be saying Merry Christmas again very soon. We'll count on it. You will be saying Merry Christmas again very soon. We'll count on it. You will be saying Merry Christmas again very soon. We'll count on it. Thank you. Mr. President, thank you so much for being. When was the last time you saw Merry Christmas? You don't see it anymore.
If I become president, we're all going to be saying Merry Christmas again.
We're going to be saying Merry Christmas again.
That I can tell you.
You see, I have a wall that's painted red. Oh, great. Oh, that's wonderful. If I'm president, you're going to see Merry Christmas in department stores. Believe me. We're going to be saying Merry Christmas again. We're going to be saying.
That I can tell you.
And I have friends that aren't Christian. They like to say Merry Christmas. They love it. Everybody loves it. They don't use the word Christmas because it's not politically correct. You go to department stores and they'll say Happy New Year and they'll say other things and it'll be red. They'll have it painted, but they don't say, well, guess what? We're saying Merry Christmas again.
Do you remember when Pope Benedict wore this thing? Everyone was saying, oh, it's a Santa hat. It's not. It's called a Camaro. Think of it like a 12th century beanie for cardinals and popes. Although it looks like a cat missing a tail. Was it the Camaro that inspired the most recognizable hat in the world? You tell me.
In America, we don't worship government, we worship God. Our religious liberty is enshrined in the very First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. The American founders invoked our Creator 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin reminded his colleagues at the Constitutional Convention to begin by bowing their heads in prayer. I remind you that we're going to start saying Merry Christmas again.
Now more than ever, our nation needs a renewal of the values that this organization promotes and that the Catholic faithful live out each and every day in peace. We love the Catholic people. We love the Catholic religion. And above all, we respect it greatly. As president, I will always support you in your effort to serve our fellow citizens and to lift up all humanity. I will protect the Catholic Church, and I will defend the rights of religious believers of every race, religion, color, and creed.
Clearly, Constantine was an avid worshiper of the sun god Sol Invictus. Amazingly, Martin Luther, the champion of the modern-day Protestant movement, said,
"They allege that the Sabbath changed into Sunday, the Lord's Day, contrary to the Decalogue as it appears. Neither is there any example more boasted of than the changing of the Sabbath day. Great, say they, is the power and authority of the Church, since it dispensed with one of the 10 Commandments."
Nowhere in the Bible do we see that Yahshua and his apostles changed the day of worship from Saturday to Sunday. In fact, the Messiah in his Sermon on the Mount has this end-time prophecy: "Pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day."
Arch. Here, there is an inscription, and it states in Latin, Instinctu Divinitatis, which describes Constantine as divinely inspired. But if it's not Jesus who's inspiring him, which God is? When looking at what's depicted on his arch, what we find are pagan gods from the Roman pantheon, and none so prominently rendered as the sun god Apollo.
The light is amazing.
And it's so appropriate with the rising of the sun god right there to have it illuminated by the sun this way.
Before Constantine's alleged vision, he followed the official religion of the Roman Empire, the imperial cult, a pagan religion that worshipped Apollo above all else. Much like the pagan god Mithras, Apollo was the sun god that represented the light of creation. According to the imperial cult, Constantine, as emperor, was a superhuman avatar, the link between Apollo and the rest of humanity. And from the archaeology, it's clear that Constantine bought into this idea completely. He commissioned this 12-meter statue of himself. And not surprisingly, the statue came with an enormous head. Built into the statue's healthy hairline may be evidence that Constantine believed he was more than a mere representative of Apollo.
There are dowel holes that certainly were for some kind of insert, and it seems likely that it was for a rayed crown.
That's not Christian to me. To me, that's saying, I am God.
Right. There's absolutely no humility in any of Constantine's self-fashioning. I mean, he's very happy to have a 40-foot tall statue of himself looming over this space in the center of Rome. He allows cities in the north of Italy to erect cults to his family, to worship him as a god.
He is aloof, he's giant, and he's godlike.
Yes, he's superhuman. He is superhuman.
The image of Constantine with sun rays emanating from his head not only matches the earliest images of Apollo, it also matches the iconography of Mithras. And is it just coincidence that Christian art begins to depict Jesus the same way, with a halo of light around his head? Or was Constantine combining all the gods of light into one? When Constantine claimed to have had a vision of the Milvian Bridge, which religion was Constantine truly embracing? Did Constantine abandon paganism for Christianity? Or did he blend Apollo and Mithras into Jesus Christ, and then refashion all three in his own image? As it turns out, when Constantine had his arch built, he topped it off with a bronze portrait of himself. Destroyed in antiquity, this statue depicted him riding the same kind of chariot as Apollo, seemingly taking off into sunny skies.
Satan decided to go still farther. He told his angels that some would be so jealous of God's law that they could not be caught in this snare. The 10 Commandments were so plain that many would believe that they were still binding, and therefore he must seek to corrupt only one of the commandments. He then led on his representatives to attempt to change the 4th, or Sabbath, commandment, thus altering the only one of the 10 which brings to view the true God, the maker of the heavens and the earth. Satan presented before them the glorious resurrection of Jesus, and told them that by his rising on the first day of the week, he changed the Sabbath from the 7th to the first day of the week. And very early in the morning the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Mark 16 verse 2.
The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre. John 20 verse 1. Jesus conquered the sun before it was risen.
At midday, O King, I saw in the way a light from heaven, above the brightness of the sun, shining round about me and them which journeyed with me. Acts 26 verse 13. Jesus is above the brightness of the sun.
And here's what some of those churches are becoming. Heaven on earth for $1 million or more. A real dollar sign of the times. This old Methodist church in Atlanta was down to about 60 members when they closed, and then sold to a luxury real estate developer 7 years ago. This was the entrance to the church?
This was the entrance to the church.
Yeah. And so the sanctuary would have been where?
Right here where we are.
Today, these are 3,000 square foot condos bathed in light, where Pottery Barn has replaced the sacraments. As that scripture says, for everything there is a season. So this is the top floor?
This is the top floor. This would be the very top of the building. When someone's in the sanctuary, they would look up and see this dental molding that probably looks small from the ground floor, but you can see it's large.
It's gorgeous. The scriptures also say that the devil is busy. And true believers say this is proof. Some of the oldest churches in the world turned into bars and nightclubs.
Santa Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Amen.
All roads lead to Rome, including modern styles of worship. All hell is breaking loose as Rome leads the religious world in adopting ungodly worship techniques. This will cause sinners to dance their way to perdition. Guilherme Peixoto, also known as DJ Priest, is a Roman Catholic priest by day and a DJ by night from northern Portugal. Pope Francis has even blessed Peixoto's headphones, which he uses to mix the dance music for this new form of evangelization among young Catholics. The youth events led by Peixoto are filled with prayers to the Virgin Mary, mesmerizing techno sounds, immodest dress, flashing lights, and lots of dancing. Israel beguiled by heathen music. Balaam knew that the prosperity of Israel depended upon their observance of the law of God, and that there was no way to bring a curse upon them but by seducing them to transgression. He decided to secure to himself Balak's reward and the promotion he desired by advising the Moabites what course to pursue to bring the curse upon Israel. He counseled Balak to proclaim an idolatrous feast in honor of their idol gods, and he would persuade the Israelites to attend, that they might be delighted with the music. And then the most beautiful Midianitish women should entice the Israelites to transgress the law of God and corrupt themselves, and also influence them to offer sacrifice to idols. This satanic counsel succeeded too well.
The bald eagle is now the national bird of the United States. Did you realize it wasn't? President Biden signed a new law making it official. The bald eagle has been a symbol of the power and strength of the U.S. for more than 240 years, but now it is the United States bird.
Why is the bald eagle the emblem of America? You've seen it on flags, coins, and stamps. A majestic bald eagle soaring high, clutching a bundle of arrows and an olive branch.
In Rome, the eagle began as a republican symbol. Hence, Americans chose their native bald eagle for the national arms in 1782. Below we have a Roman altar with a dedication to the sun god Sol on the back of the eagle of Jupiter. The eagle had its head facing right, wings outstretched, golden wreath surrounding it, representing the orb of the sun, and arrows in its talons. Sooner or later Sunday laws will be passed, but there is much for God's servants to do to warn the people. The gospel continued to spread and the number of its adherents to increase. It penetrated into regions that were inaccessible even to the eagles of Rome. Great controversy, page 41. Our pursuers were swifter than the eagles of the heavens. They pursued us on the mountains and lay in wait for us in the wilderness. Lamentations 4 verse 19.
Yeah, we'll make that law.
Sabbath blue laws.
Blue laws.
A blue law.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Sabbath laws on Sunday.
And so reaching out to the state.
Maybe the Sabbath laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Sunday closing laws. Blue laws, right?
Blue laws meant everything was closed.
The blue laws. Blue laws.
Blue laws.
Sundays accepted.
The blue laws.
Maybe Sunday Sabbath laws?
Or blue laws.
Sabbath rest. The Sabbath and the sacred blue laws.
Propose commerce on Sabbath.
Or Sabbath laws.
I would say yes and amen. I'll vote for that.
Sabbath laws. Blue laws of Sabbath laws.
Blue laws.
Sabbath laws.
I remember the blue laws.
Sabbath and obscenity laws. Blue laws and
A national honoring of the Lord's Day.
These laws are known as blue laws.
to remember the blue laws.
They have the blue law. They were called blue laws.
The idea of blue laws still makes a lot of sense.
The only way to start the return to moral order in this country is by force. It's the only way. It's the only way. It has to be by force, at least for a time. We have to regulate morality by force, at least for a time. It's literally the only solution.
We really need to be really ruthless when it comes to the exercise of power.
You can eat, play football, run a turkey trot. One thing you cannot do on Thanksgiving, though, in person is pick up last-minute items at the store or shop early Black Friday deals.
That's because Massachusetts has the so-called blue laws banning it. In tonight's Question Everything, WBZ's Beth Germano takes a look at why these laws are still on the books.
Do you know what Massachusetts blue laws are?
Not. It sounds familiar, but not 100%.
I'm assuming they have to do with alcohol or cigarettes or something.
They are old laws instituted by the Brahmin folks who controlled the city.
Well, not exactly. Let's go back to 1630 when Peter Drummey at the Massachusetts Historical Society says these laws were established by the Puritans to make sure people observed the Sabbath.
No one shall travel, cook victuals, make beds, sweep house,
cut hair or shave on the Sabbath.
These days, blue laws, a color associated with high morality, basically refer to which businesses can legally open on Sundays and holidays, but have their roots in the colonial era when John Winthrop was governor.
Somewhere someone is having fun and we're going to stop it.
There are 3 categories of blue laws still on the books. Businesses don't need a permit to operate on Martin Luther King Day, Presidents, Patriots, and Bunker Hill Day. No permit necessary, but employers can't require employees to work on New Year's Day, Memorial Day, Juneteenth, and 4th of July. And though largely unenforced, a police permit is required to open on Columbus Day before noon and Veterans Day before 1 p.m. As for Thanksgiving and Christmas, Massachusetts is one of only 3 states prohibiting stores from opening those days.
Is that coming onto the ballot anytime soon?
It's a law?
That's a law.
Wow, it's like, isn't that a violating amendment rights?
Sometimes it's easier for politicians just to take a walk and not act rather than update laws, particularly if there isn't a whole lot of pressure to do that.
John Hurst with the Massachusetts retailers says the pressure has recently been off, for example, to get stores open Thanksgiving night to get a head start on Black Friday shopping. Because let's face it, pull out your cell phone and shop 24/7. Liquor sales were prohibited on Sundays here for 2 centuries and then allowed in 2014 to open as early as 10 a.m. because tailgating Patriots fans pressured Beacon Hill. There are still what seem like archaic blue laws in Massachusetts that go beyond Sundays and holidays. Did you know it's illegal to frighten a pigeon? And you can't make or sell candy that contains more than 1% alcohol.
We're talking about 2 days a year. How are you doing today?
But Jocelyn Mitchell with Die on Liquors supports the blue laws that have her closed on Thanksgiving for one simple reason.
We care about our employees and their social emotional well-being.
Inconsistent? Archaic? Perhaps.
Hunt says about 2 years ago, she noticed the corporation started to encourage Utah franchises to open on Sundays.
They started just suggesting it as like would be something to consider as individual bakeries, knowing that it wasn't a requirement in our operations manual at the time.
Then, last summer, she noticed a change.
Notification was sent out. The operations manual in 2024 was updated to then require Sundays.
And she says that mandate requires them to open on Sundays starting on February 2nd. Hunt reached out to Representative Ken Ivory about the issue. In early January, he introduced a bill that, according to a news release, would ensure franchises have the assurance that their religious rights and convictions are not infringed unless such stipulation was expressly negotiated and included in the initial franchise agreement. Hunt says Utah Bakery sent a request to Nothing Bundt Cakes Corporate asking for a delay in the mandate because of the pending legislation, but have not received a response.
Stacey, Justin, a bill scheduled for a public hearing Wednesday morning is seeking to bring blue laws back to the state. You may remember North Dakota's blue laws and how they were repealed in 2019. If not, blue laws prohibit certain businesses from being open from midnight until noon on Sundays. The law would mostly affect retail outlets selling items like jewelry, clothing, vehicles, and even paint and lumber. Now, the repeal of North Dakota's previous blue laws was decided by only 2 votes. Now, the Fargo-Moorhead West Fargo Chamber, they've already released a statement opposing bringing back blue laws, saying in part, "We urge the North Dakota legislature to reject the bill and preserve the freedom for businesses to operate as they see fit."
In a 10-4 vote, lawmakers voted to recommend not passing it on the House floor. They heard testimony from supporters saying it's beneficial for employees to have time to spend with families and attend religious gatherings. Those in opposition argue it dampens local economic growth.
I think we live in a culture that's so hyper-focused on capitalism, material wealth, and looking at things through purely an economic lens. And there are more important matters in life than just a balance sheet.
We hope that you see that this limits economic freedom, it limits consumer choice, it turns the clock back on North Dakota.
3 times the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Sunday blue laws in the 1960s. Why? Because of the rest, that the state has a compelling interest in not just individuals to rest, not just families, but whole communities to all rest on the same day, that it is better for our culture. Now to the rest day and the Supreme Court. All the states had this, by the way, and virtually, and I've read them all. 6 years ago, I got a whole packet I could give you if you wanted of all, not just the founding fathers, but almost everybody during that time when they discussed the Sunday Blue Laws were in favor of them. And guess what? They're the ones that gave us our liberty. So if we're talking about liberty and freedom for business and freedom for people, why would those who actually gave us the liberty and defined it for us have been all in favor of the Sunday Blue Laws? That just doesn't make any sense.
The image to the beast represents that form of apostate Protestantism which will be developed when the Protestant churches shall seek the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of their dogmas. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends.
Wake up the watchman to carry the word of warning to every city in America. Build up the waste places. The righteous judgments of God, with their weight of final decision, are coming upon the land. Do not hover over the churches to repeat over and over again the same truths to the people, while the cities are left in ignorance and sin, unwarned and unlabored for. Soon the way will be hedged up, and these cities will be closed to the gospel message.
Story of 4 leaders from 4 different churches in West Texas who picked a novel way to preach tolerance and acceptance. CBS's Jason Allen reports on the power of not just walking in another man's shoes, but preaching from his pulpit.
Anyone walking into this Mexican restaurant in Midland, Texas, probably wouldn't give a second glance to the 4 guys at a corner table laughing over their enchiladas. But this lunch meetup wouldn't be found on everyone's menu around here.
My great-grandfather was pastor for a long time, and he would be horrified at this partnership. He would be horrified.
Darren Wood is a Baptist pastor, and Steve Brooks, Alan Stanglin, and Steve Shore are pastors too, but not Baptists, leading to some eternal differences of opinion.
The only ones going to heaven.
Oh, wait, I've heard that about the Baptists.
I've heard that all of my life.
Yeah, we've all claimed that at one point in time, right?
65% of people here in Midland County regularly go to church, but not the same church. In fact, there are as many as 45 different religious traditions represented here, from Protestant to Catholic to Hindu to Muslim. A few years ago, the newest leader of one of those West Texas churches was Stanglin at the Church of Christ. He was curious about finding ways his church community could do more for the Midland community. So he put in a call to a Presbyterian.
So is it okay if our whole church comes to your church? And so...
Wait, you went right away from lunch to let's have our whole church come over to the Presbyterian church?
You might ask Steve, but yeah, kinda. Yeah, that's how it happened.
In those post-pandemic years, the friendship grew to 4. And then this fall, during an election season where they saw a divide in their city and the country, an idea developed to reach across their own major denominational lines. Who made that suggestion to switch pulpits, and did anybody hesitate?
I think we all hesitated.
I don't know. I don't know who.
We believe that the word...
Denominations have built their foundations over centuries, with leaders taking great care not to undermine a church's beliefs.
I was a little worried, maybe, not because I didn't trust Alan, but because we'd never tried this before. This was a grand and beautiful experiment.
On a Sunday morning in November,
would y'all please help me give Pastor Darren a warm welcome?
The Baptist preached to Presbyterians. The Church of Christ pastor gave his first sermon to the First Baptists.
I have spent all of my preaching life trying to make sure we get out on time to beat the Baptist. And now I'm with the Baptist.
We've got a cross in our church too.
And if there was grumbling or griping from the pews, not a single pastor said they heard a word of it.
What came to me is people are sick and tired of division. Unity takes relationship. It takes Mexican food, right? Right? It does. Sitting down and talking to each other. And if people are willing to do that, it will happen.
This is an opportunity to...
Maybe then, a Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, and Church of Christ pastor can go into a restaurant together, and it won't be a joke anymore.
Wonderful. Thank you.
In the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verses 11 and 12, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him. I saw that the 2-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head, and that the decree would go out of his mouth. Then I saw the mother of harlots, that the mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and it is past, and her daughters, the Protestant sex, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. I saw that as the mother has been declining in power, the daughters had been growing, and soon they will exercise the power once exercised by the mother.
General Marty Jackley is joining 17 other state attorneys general in supporting Louisiana's law requiring the display of the 10 Commandments in public schools and universities. Jackley points out that the 10 Commandments are already displayed in the U.S. Supreme Court and have influenced American laws. The Louisiana law, which was passed last year, is currently blocked by a federal court, though. Meantime, in South Dakota, a state lawmaker has introduced a similar bill for the upcoming legislative session.
Right now, a North Dakota state lawmaker says he wants to bring back the 10 Commandments. Representative Jeff Hoverson from Minot wrote House Bill 1145, which would require colleges and public schools to hang a copy of the 10 Commandments in classrooms. Today, supporters and opponents testified on the bill in a House Judiciary hearing. A spokesperson for the North Dakota School Boards Association argues the bill violates the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment and could open North Dakota up to future lawsuits.
And that's why people wanted to move here, was because of the freedom that were induced in large part by the 10 Commandments, which is why even atheists can appreciate the 10 Commandments, because an atheist can live here, a Buddhist can live here, a Muslim can live here, and a Christian can live here. And if our moral code is do not steal from your neighbor, don't talk behind their back, don't even want their stuff, that's freedom for everybody. And there you can't get a better document for freedom.
These students are, by definition, in a captive audience. And so therefore, we see the religious coercion concern, because of being legally required to attend school, to be of an utmost concern.
A bill that would require the 10 Commandments to be posted and taught in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, public schools will make an appearance in the upcoming legislative session. Our State House reporter Grant Green has more on the freshman lawmaker sponsoring this bill who is ready to fight for it. Hello there, Grant.
Hey, Brian. First-term lawmakers don't typically carry much legislation, if at all. But Senator John Carley out of Piedmont says it's important to recognize the historical significance of the 10 Commandments in U.S. history.
Tooele School District's curriculum will now include the 10 Commandments, and tonight we're learning just how little opposition the proposal faced. The 10 Commandments are part of the board's agenda to add what they call American heritage in the curriculum. Now, also included along with the commandments or Magna Carta, the commandments are considered historical documents and principles along the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Now, when these new additions came to a vote, the board decided unanimously.
I will now say a prayer. And to be clear, students, you don't have to join. But if you so wish, I'm going to go ahead and pray. Dear God, thank you for all the blessings you've given our country.
This is the video sparking controversy across Oklahoma. On Thursday, this video of State Superintendent Ryan Walters was sent to schools, directing them to play it for students and send it to parents. In it, Walters promises to protect students and staff who wish to exercise their religious beliefs at school with a new office, the Office of Religious Liberty and Patriotism, before bowing his head and praying.
This isn't pushing one religion onto a child or a family. This is saying whatever your religion, whatever your faith is, or if you don't have it, that is completely up to you. We are going to protect your ability to exercise that.
And blasting the radical left for attacking religious liberties in schools. But schools across the metro told KOCO they're not going to play this video. Mustang says Walters has no authority to invoke this, sending this letter to parents, saying they have no plans to interrupt the school day to show or send this video Instead, we'll focus on using that time for curriculum. UConn says no. They want to focus on curriculum approved by state legislators. Norman also says no, saying they want to keep an inclusive environment that neither promotes or threatens religious beliefs, and will continue offering students a daily moment of silence. Edmond says no, and Oklahoma City Public Schools says their district leaders are meeting Friday to discuss what they'll do. This is what Walters said when we told him several superintendents were pushing back.
We know we have some rogue superintendents that like to push a left-wing agenda onto their kids and like to continue to push state-sponsored atheism in our classrooms by pushing out any kind of mention of God. But look, we're not going to tolerate it.
Evangelists should be finding their way into all the places where the minds of men are agitated over the question of Sunday legislation and of the teaching of religion in the public schools. It is the neglect of Seventh-day Adventists to improve these providential opportunities to present the truth that burdens my heart and keeps me awake night after night.
You lose sleep over
Yes.
this church closing.
Yes, because I don't want to lose my family. My family is very important to me.
And this church.
It gives me purpose to get up in the morning.
Yeah.
They believe that people need places to pray more than they know.
We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at the World Trade Center in New York.
And they point to the days and months after the terrorist attacks on September 11th, when people looked to God for answers.
We suffer from amnesia.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at the tragedy of 9/11, churches were full immediately following that tragic event because we weren't in control. So who do we go to? We go to a God who is meant to guide us, to see us through tragedy. For lack of a better way of saying this, we've taken for granted that my church will always be there. But we've never asked the question, how is it going to be there? And how is it going to stay?
In the White House telling Fox Business it's now considering declaring a national climate emergency. But that's a climate crisis to you, Mark. The AP, which sets the standards for newsrooms across the country, they're urging Americans to use the term climate crisis to address the current situation. This is all troubling, but if the president declares a climate emergency, what impact does that have?
Well, I mean, this is the serious story of the day. NBC News has reported that if Joe Biden declares a national climate emergency, he would have COVID-like powers under that emergency, and they also compared the emergency powers to the 9/11 emergency powers. The Center for Biological Diversity has estimated Joe Biden would get about 130 wartime-like powers by which to bypass democracy and impose a Green New Deal on America without a single vote of Congress. This is truly this is a Halloween story, not a story for Earth Day. This is a truly frightening story, and he might just be desperate enough to do it. This is being widely reported in the media. The Biden White House is leaking this out. This might happen, and this is going to give Joe Biden these kind of, you want to say the word dictatorial powers. He doesn't need no stinking democracy to impose the Green New Deal if he does this.
Well, they drained 260 million barrels from their strategic petroleum reserve to keep gas prices down ahead of the midterms. Haven't been able to refill it. What are they going to do? Let Iran pump more oil. Mark Morano, thank you so much. Thanks, and by the way, I'd love to see the Inupiat indigenous people in Alaska who have been big-footed by Biden with this order about new drilling and development, them tackle those climate nuts on that stage. Let them go after them.
Apocalyptic views in Southern California has everyone looking for answers as fires continue to burn.
This is like Mars, the moon, Armageddon, climate change. I mean, something's going on here. It's absolutely, utterly insane.
Fires are complex, but most experts agree one contributing factor stands above the rest: climate change.
It does seem like the hotter Earth is generating more and more extreme weather for everybody. When we issue a particularly dangerous situation, that's usually a 5 to 10 year event, and yet here we've issued 3 of them in the past 3 months.
2024 was the hottest year on record. For the first time ever, the global temperature rose by more than 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit compared to the pre-industrial average. And the heating planet causes a phenomenon that San Jose State climate scientist Eugene Cordero says is known as hydroclimate whiplash.
Where you go from dry to wet, back to dry, is something that's challenging to forecast.
but certainly something California has been experienced before. We have these super dry years, and then next thing you know, we're having these floods.
That's because warm air works like a giant sponge. When it releases water, it can soak our state, like with the historic atmospheric rivers from past winters. But when that water gets soaked back up, CSU East Bay Assistant Professor Tony Marks-Block says there may not be significant rainfall for months, like we've seen in Southern California.
It becomes really prime conditions for these extreme fire events, and the Santa Ana winds or the phone winds accelerated the spread of fire.
Marks-Block says extreme conditions like these are possible throughout the state, including here in the Bay Area.
We know that these are not once in 100-year events anymore, that these are events that are still, not happening everywhere all the time, but the risk of these events is becoming higher.
As the weather becomes more unpredictable, Cordero says we may need to adjust where and how we live to prevent further destruction. Dustin Dorsey, ABC 7 News.
Fire and ash, devastation in LA.
Have been on fire. Who got shouted out the most? Let's look at the numbers. All right, cast and crew are leading the way with 11 mentions. Moms are holding strong with 3 shout outs. God, creator of the universe, 0 mentions. No surprise in this godless town. God, creator of the universe, 0 mentions. 0 mentions. 0 mentions.
The flames are still burning, and questions are burning too.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor? Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be.
Times headlined, "I'm a climate scientist. I fled Los Angeles 2 years ago." He joins me. Explain why you fled Los Angeles 2 years ago.
The reason I wrote the piece was because we have to acknowledge that this is caused by the fossil fuel industry, which has been lying for almost half a century.
My name is Ted Ross, Chief Information Officer at the City of Los Angeles. As you know, we live in a world full of urban challenges, from traffic congestion that takes our time and pollutes our environment, to natural disasters that threaten the safety of our communities. To address these challenges, Los Angeles looks to smart city technology that can positively transform our urban environment.
And one California family is going viral, singing in prayer after finding the only thing left standing on their property, a statue of the Virgin Mary.
Joel, you have a ministry called California Will Be Saved. How can God use such a horrific tragedy as these wildfires to save people?
And David, we've spoken to experts who tell us with the continued effects from climate change, increased winds, increased average temperature, increased severity of drought, unfortunately, situations like this will almost certainly be more common in the future. David?
Priority for the Holy Father.
I think with the Laudato Si, we have the 11th commandment. Don't waste. It's very important for our society, for our sons, for the future.
Agli abitanti della contea di Los Angeles, California, dove nei giorni scorsi sono divampati incendi devastanti. Prego per tutti voi.
We're going to start focusing mainly on climate like global warming, and so our next thing is going to be climate change awareness.
Climate crisis, climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change. Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Climate crisis.
Climate change. Climate change. Warming climate. Climate crisis.
He's pursuing his own agenda items in regards to politicization, in regards to the environment and climate change, redistribution of wealth, and immigration. So what he's trying to do is forefront the issue with his role as the Pope to influence that direction of those issues.
Brothers, I'm grateful to be here with Bishop Elias Zaidan to speak to you about the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si, which is next year. Today we want your input on what to do. In the next few minutes, we will offer some background and give some examples for your consideration. We will then solicit your feedback through discussions at our tables and conclude with some time for floor discussion. All of us have worked to implement Laudato Si over these past 9 years. To expand these efforts, we also have to talk about the challenge. The news is filled with wars, political polarization, and violence, threats to life and inequality. just to name a few. It can be tempting to let care for creation become less prominent. The response, I believe, is found in Laudato Si itself. Everything is connected. Because creation is related to everything human, our efforts around Laudato Si need not be weighed down by many new programs and tasks. Rather, Laudato Si can be integrated into our core mission of evangelization. Thus, the celebration of the anniversary of Laudato Si presents for us both an important task and a great opportunity. To see the opportunity, we must accept evangelization is the framework, or hermeneutical key for integral ecology. We can see this with the triptych of Laudato Si, Fratelli Tutti, in the Pope's latest encyclical, Dilexit Nos. In Laudato Si, the Holy Father offered his vision of integral ecology, which is nothing less than a comprehensive vision of the common good, of the common good, of the common good.
In respecting religious liberty and the common good of all, Christians should seek recognition of Sundays and the Church's holy days as legal holidays.
The common good is one of the most important concepts in social ethics. I think problematically, it has been understood as a predominantly Catholic concept through its use in Christian ethics. And I don't think it has to be the case. The common good is something that I think Protestants absolutely should adopt and use as one of the primary kind of horizons that we think about ethics within. The common good is something that I think Protestants absolutely should adopt and use as the common good is something that I think Protestants absolutely should adopt and use as one of the primary kind of horizons that we think about ethics within. To say that the common good is of extreme importance is to recognize that it's the job of political communities and political governments to work to secure the common good, which means we would say that it's absolutely incumbent upon governing authorities to pass laws, governing authorities to pass laws, governing authorities to pass laws. And I think the common good is such an important concept for Protestants to make use of, because it helps us understand that when we're pursuing the welfare of the city, as Jeremiah tells us to pursue, it's that we're not looking out for our self-interest alone. Protestants and Catholics have some irreconcilable disagreements, and we don't want to play down those disagreements on matters of soteriology, on matters of ecclesiology. We need to really be clear on what those differences are. So I think a lot of individuals have come up with this term called co-belligerency, meaning that we don't see ourselves necessarily in communion with each other as far as our churches are concerned, but that we have shared concerns about what the common good is, about what society ought to look like. We do have kind of minimal agreements on, perhaps the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and so we're willing to work together on those kind of grounds, but we're not willing to kind of consider ourselves going to church with each other. We can link arms because we're ultimately all striving. We can link arms because we're ultimately all striving. We can link arms because we're ultimately all striving after the same end.
When our nation, the United States, shall so abjure the principles of its government as to enact a Sunday law, Protestantism will in this act join hands with popery. It will be nothing else than giving life to the tyranny which has long been eagerly watching its opportunity to spring again into active despotism.
A couple years ago, in an evangelical website called The Baptist Message, a proposal was made, a radical environmental proposal, a day of rest. May 1st, 2020, by Will Hall, Message Executive Editor, Alexandria, Louisiana, LBM. Last week, as environmentalists around the world celebrated Earth Day, I was intrigued by the potential of a biblical solution to the problem of air pollution, a day of rest. The concept of a day of rest is nothing new to people of faith. We are familiar with God's 6 days of creation, his forming the heavens and the earth and fashioning all the creatures of the air, land and sea, as well as molding man into his image. Likewise, we know our Heavenly Father established the seventh day as a time of rest.
And then the great deceiver will persuade men that those who serve God are causing these evils. It will be declared that men are offending God by the violation of the Sunday Sabbath, that this sin has brought calamities which will not cease until Sunday observance shall be strictly enforced, and that those who present the claims of the fourth commandment, thus destroying reverence for Sunday, are troublers of the people, preventing their restoration to divine favor and temporal prosperity.
But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and that thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. Deuteronomy 5 verses 14 to 15. One of the important reasons why the Lord delivered Israel from slavery to Egypt was that they might keep his holy Sabbath. The Egyptians did not give them religious liberty, so the Lord brought forth his people. The observance of the Sabbath was not to be a commemoration of their slavery in Egypt, however. Its observance and remembrance of creation was to include a joyful remembrance of deliverance from religious oppression in Egypt that made Sabbath observance difficult. In the same way, their deliverance from slavery was forever to kindle in their hearts a tender regard for the poor and oppressed, the fatherless and widows. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. In late August, 1619, 20 to 30 enslaved Africans landed at Point Comfort, today's Fort Monroe, in Hampton, Virginia, aboard the English privateer ship White Lion. In Virginia, these Africans were traded in exchange for supplies. Several days later, a second ship, Treasurer, arrived in Virginia with additional enslaved Africans. Both groups had been captured by English privateers from the Spanish slave ship San Juan Bautista. They are the first recorded Africans to arrive in England's mainland American colonies. Many Southern Christians felt that slavery stands as an institution of God. The Sunday keepers did not give the slaves religious liberty the same way they obtained freedom from God coming to the New World. The true seventh-day Sabbath would have enlightened America from abusing his neighbor. Let's keep the true Sabbath.
They threaten our personal freedom with a Hunger Games-style plan to control the population.
You have no right to do this to limit the way that people can move around their city.
That is the so-called climate tyranny or green tyranny, where individual civil liberties are stripped away under the pretext of solving climate change.
They don't have facilities around them in 15 minutes to walk to. So once again, ordinary people are being punished more.
Well, creepy local authority bureaucrats would like to see your entire existence boiled down to the duration of a quarter of an hour.
But 15-minute cities will cost us our personal freedom, and that cannot be right.
This is about freedom of choice.
Well, yes, Tampa, Florida is on the list to become a new 15-minute city. It will happen through the Tampa Moves plan. Yes, you heard me right. Tampa, Florida is on the list to become a new 15-minute city. That's right. The 40 acres of waterfront property is owned by none other than Bill Gates through an investment fund. Waterfront property in Tampa, Florida. Now, thanks to Patriot's Voice for that little Bill Gates part of the story. I knew that Tampa was on the list among Portland, Oregon, Portland, Maine. There's a bunch of other cities right now that are sort of on that target list to become 15-minute cities, and Tampa is one of them. And right now, of course, in the eye of a hurricane. But again, Patriot's Voice, I didn't realize Bill Gates was actually behind it and the funding for it. But that shouldn't surprise any of us, right?
We should hold a contest to charter up to 10 new cities and award them to the best proposals for development. In other words, we'll actually build new cities in our country again. These freedom cities will reopen the frontier, reignite American imagination, and give hundreds of thousands of young people and other people, all hardworking families, a new shot at home ownership and, in fact, the American dream. We will then open up large parcels of inexpensive land, bring in doctors, psychiatrists, social workers, and drug rehab specialists and create 10 cities where the homeless can be relocated and their problems identified. But we'll open up our cities again, make them livable and make them beautiful. We'll ban urban camping wherever possible. Violators of these bans will be arrested, but they will be given the option to accept treatment and services if they're willing to be rehabilitated. Many of them don't want that.
Do you think Donald Trump is smart enough to realize that he's a fascist and that these great ideas of his are straight out of the fascist playbook? The idea of outlawing homelessness and arresting everyone who refuses to comply, and then giving them the option to get out of jail and be relocated to new tent cities elsewhere, somewhere. Internment camps, basically. That is what he's describing.
In Genesis 11, humanity united to build a massive tower to reach heaven, driven by pride and ambition. But their goal wasn't to glorify God, it was to glorify themselves. Pride led them to defy God's command to fill the earth. God saw their pride and rebellion and acted. He confused their language, scattering them across the earth. The Tower of Babel reminds us, pride separates us from God, but his plans always prevail. God turned human pride into a greater purpose, teaching us humility and trust in his plan.
The terrible disasters that are befalling great cities ought to arouse us to intense activity in giving the warning message to the people in these congested centers of population while we still have an opportunity. The most favorable time for the presentation of our message in the cities has passed by. Sin and wickedness are rapidly increasing, and now we shall have to redeem the time by laboring all the more earnestly.
Depart ye, go ye out from thence, touch no unclean thing. Go ye out of the midst of her. Be ye clean, that bear the vessels of the Lord. For ye shall not go out with haste, nor go by flight, for the Lord will go before you, and the God of Israel will be your reward. Isaiah 52 verses 11 to 12. Out of the cities, out of the cities. This is the message the Lord has been giving me. The earthquakes will come, the floods will come, and we are not to establish ourselves in the wicked cities, where the enemy is served in every way, and where God is so often forgotten.
There will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able. When the idolatrous standards of the Romans should be set up in the holy ground, which extended some furlongs outside the city walls, then the followers of Christ were to find safety in flight.
The United States defined global religious freedom as a moral and national security imperative and promised to respect and promote this freedom. This is part of the Executive Order on Advancing International Religious Freedom, signed by President Donald Trump after visiting the St. John Paul II National Shrine on June 2nd. The U.S. ambassador to the Holy See in Rome shared the commitment of their embassy to fulfilling this mission.
Engage faith-based and community groups in its work, whether it's building hospitals or orphanages. In a more formal way, President Clinton kicked off a lot of this with his charitable choice rule. President Bush expanded it even further by creating the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives.
And it will be the purpose of the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships that I'm announcing later today.
The office is the arm of the federal government that seeks to connect the government with local faith-based and secular community organizations to serve people in need, whether it's connecting groups that are training people to do new jobs or figuring out the role of faith-based organizations in combating global climate change. This office creates those partnerships in a way that's responsible, constitutional, and at the bottom line, helps those in need.
President Joe Biden signs an executive order setting up the White House Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. He says its mission is to help battle COVID-19, address social issues, and advance global humanitarian work.
State Governor Stitt announced the launch of the Oklahoma Office of Faith-Based Initiatives, a state office that will serve as a hub for churches and faith-based nonprofits to connect with Oklahomans in need.
This office will also help ensure that faith-based organizations have equal access to government funding and the equal right to exercise their deeply held
beliefs.
Offices like this aren't uncommon in the White House. Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush signed similar executive orders. But Trump's order is about more than just access to federal funds. This group will be on the lookout for any executive branch action that fails to comply with protections of federal law for religious liberty, and it will identify and propose means to reduce burdens on the exercise of religious convictions.
Pope Francis. There is no church apart from the Pope. Apart from Peter, apart from the major archbishop, there is no church.
And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. Daniel 8 verse 25. As America, the land of religious liberty, shall unite with the papacy in forcing the conscience and compelling men to honor the false Sabbath, the people of every country on the globe will be led to follow her example.
Neither today nor a year from today am I going to be sitting in my office at Heritage sort of keeping score about who's in the administration and not. That's not why we do what we do. We exist every day to be of service to the American people and to the administration. For that matter, if the Democrats had won, and although it would have been very surprising for them to have called us and say, you got a name for so-and-so agency, we would have done that too. This is the whole point about the work that Heritage does.
We're a public policy organization, so like other think tanks, we research policies. We work on every policy issue in the United States and also have a significant international presence. There are about 350 full-time employees. We're the largest conservative think tank in the world, best as I can tell. We don't exist to be the largest, but we've become that over the last 50 years.
Which is a phrase that I actually don't like, because so many times it's meant like that's the end of the story. Meet them where they are. It's like with one of our kids when he was 2, meeting him where he was he gets to eat Fruit Loops all day. Well, that's not good for his physical formation. Obviously, much more important questions about spiritual formation. The difficult thing for those of us who are in politics is that, even at Heritage, where we're really zealously focused on policy, not elections, policy outcomes often are determined by who wins the election. So we have to pay attention to the elections. The challenge for us is we feel like Rome, Washington, is on fire. We feel like Rome, Washington, is on fire. We feel like Rome, Washington, is on fire. And that there isn't enough time. But in fact, we are on God's time. Doesn't think in terms of days and months and presidential election cycles. She doesn't even think in terms of decades. She thinks in terms of centuries and millennia. And I have to tell myself, as an American exceptionalist, a historian of the American founding who loves this country and can never give back to it what she has given to him, that even America can get it wrong sometimes. And it's trite to say that, but we also know that it's true. And we know that Mother Church,
A Protestant minister, Thomas Tillam, identified the whore's mark in 1657 before Seventh-day Adventist. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the time and times and the dividing of time. Daniel 7 verse 25. But further, how dreadful is it to the Father that change of the Sabbath upon the precious Son of God, which is the detestable design of the little horn, the changer of times. And laws what? Charge that upon Christ, which is the proper presumption of Antichrist. Is not this the whore's mark, to change the saints' times? The saints' Sabbath time, and the saints per time. Doctrine Sabbath, Thomas Tillam, The Seventh-Day Sabbath, sought out in 1657, page 124.
The seal of God in the forehead and on the hand. Let's read one of the texts. Deuteronomy 6 verses 6 to 8. And these words, which I command thee this day, shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes. The mark on the forehead is to ignore the Sabbath and worship on Sunday. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead, or in his hand. Revelation 14 verse 9. The mark on the hand is to ignore the Sabbath and doing our own activities during that day. That's the mark on the hand. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Isaiah 56 verse 2.
They say even if every church closes, this God thing isn't going away. That the church will always be the people and not the buildings that come and go. There will always be a need, they say, to find comfort in the heavens.
There's a sociological principle or idea out there that when times are good, people forget God. When times are challenging, they go to God first.
The sale of the All Saints Church in Buffalo will close in 60 days. The priests say they have language in the deal that prevents the new owners from ever turning this into a place that encourages people to sin. No matter how much the good book tells them that things change, they want this always to be a place where God lives.
This Bible is the King James Version and also includes our Founding Father documents, yes, the Constitution. There you have it. Let's make America pray again. Let's make America pray again. Let's make America pray again. God bless you, and God bless the USA. We're able to do it because you're the people we want to hear from, the pastors and the ministers and the rabbis. The people in this room are the people we want to hear from, and they have to have a political voice. You know, if you think about it, you have men, you have women, and you have religion. If you look at it, you have more than the men, you have more than the women. You have such power, but you weren't allowed to use that power, and you're now allowed to use it. I get in there, you're going to be using that power at a level that you've never used it before. It's going to bring back the churchgoer. It's going to bring back the churchgoer. It's going to bring back the churchgoer. I mean, you have to see. I don't like the charts. When I see charts where they're going in the wrong direction, we don't like that. We're going to bring it back, and I really believe it's the biggest thing missing from this country. It's the biggest thing missing. We have to bring back our religion. We have to bring back Christianity in this country.
And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Revelation 16 verses 13 to 14.
Back when the Lord's Day Alliance was formed, the issue of Sunday laws was really a hot topic. In May of 1888, Senator Henry Blair of New Hampshire proposed legislation to limit secular activities on Sundays within the jurisdiction of the United States federal government. Senator Blair made it clear that the aim of his bill was to preserve the first day of the week as a day of rest and religious observance. The bill was referred to the Senate Committee on Education and Labor, where Blair was chairman. Among those who raised objections to the proposed legislation was Alonzo Jones.
Sir, you may speak of the power of the majority in social and civil matters, but there is no majority, however large, that can invade the territory of a man's religion. Not in this land, not under our Constitution.
Mr. Jones, you fail to recognize the right, or more importantly, the responsibility of the state to protect the welfare of the people as a whole.
Senator, it seems that you fail to recognize the clear distinction between man's responsibility to the state and his duty toward God. The first, he must render under the force of law. The second, duty to God must be carried out only under the force of love, and that freely, voluntarily. No law can command love.
But the law of the state must protect the people to carry out their duty to God. Our Sunday law is written to ensure the preservation of the Lord's Day for the benefit of the people.
An admirable goal, Senator Blair, but completely unnecessary. Our Constitution already recognizes the rights of the people with respect to their religion. Your Sunday law would add nothing to our fundamental freedoms. It would rather add restrictions.
I'm afraid, sir, that you are blind to the realities of our age. If men owe a duty to God and do not willingly perform it, they become a corrupting influence in society.
This proposed Sunday law would have a corrupting influence by introducing force and coercion into its observance.
On the contrary, the intended effect is to enhance the Sabbath. If men do not consent to honor the Lord's day, if their actions on that day are unrestrained by civil law, then they trample on the very rights of those who would honor and observe the day as holy unto the Lord.
With all due respect, Senator, can you not see that your Sunday bill proposes to trample on the rights of the religious minorities? Do you really want to revert to those dark ages where church and state united to force men to violate their conscience and conform to an officially established religion?
Now, that is an unworthy comparison, sir. Our Sunday law is for the ultimate benefit of the whole society. Is it not a legitimate function of the state to legislate on behalf of the common good?
The common good of which you value so highly is not served by restricting the rights of one man's conscience in order to enlarge the rights of another. It is best served by the freedoms upon which this republic was established. State-sponsored religious coercion defies the clear intent of the Founding Fathers.
But this law provides an exemption for those who wish to worship on another day. Jews, Seventh-day Baptists, your Seventh-day Adventists, for example, who observe Saturday as the Sabbath. So where's the problem?
The problem is...
Why, just this morning, a Mrs. Batum of the Women's Christian Temperance Union addressed this committee in support of such an exemption. She has conferred with representatives of 9 different groups who observe Saturday rather than Sunday, and you know how many of those approved the exemption? All of them. Every single one.
Senator, I have great respect for the temperance principles promoted by Mrs. Batum's organization, but she does not speak for my denomination on the question of exemptions.
Come now, Professor Jones, are you about to object to exemptions that would certainly benefit your group and several others?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, we do object. An exemption clause would not change the proposed law so as to modify our opposition. Here is the principle, Senator. If the law were just and perfect, an exemption would not be necessary. Another thing, an exemption clause is nothing other than a toleration clause in disguise. Toleration is not liberty. It is merely a form of condescension, the majority putting up with the opinions and convictions of the minority. Our Constitution guarantees not tolerance, but rights, and we claim those rights as American citizens.
Mr. Jones, without yielding the point, let me move to another question. How would you react if we were to rewrite this bill as a Saturday law, with Saturday as the Sabbath, not Sunday at all? I suppose you would take a very different position.
To the contrary, Senator. All laws that attempt to force the conscience are manifestly unchristian and unconstitutional by their very nature. Therefore, Senator, we are against every Sunday law that has ever been made since the first one enacted by Constantine to the one you are proposing now. And if you changed it from a Sunday law to a Saturday law, we would oppose it just as firmly.
Satan puts his interpretation upon events, and they think, as he would have them, that the calamities which fill the land are a result of Sunday breaking. Thinking to appease the wrath of God, these influential men make laws enforcing Sunday observance.
We are to keep the Lord's Day holy, and we do this most properly through our worship of God on Sunday at Holy Mass. But this is so much more than just going to Mass. It is truly an opportunity to be drawn into the life of God, to be drawn towards the eternal Sunday of heaven. Let's take a look at this commandment from the point of view of how our Sunday worship is truly the most proper fulfilling of this most beautiful commandment. The third commandment is to remember to keep holy the Lord's Day. Now, this formulation is different from the original, which is found in Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. There, the people are exhorted through Moses to keep holy the Sabbath, reminded as they were of God's work of creating and how in 6 days he carried out all his work, and rested on the seventh. So too God's holy people were to carry out their work over the first 6 days of the week and to rest on the seventh or Sabbath day. And when we consider this commandment, it is important for us to recognize that the implications for us as Christians believing in Jesus Christ, crucified, died, and risen from the dead, that the reality of keeping the Lord's Day is centered upon not the creation of this world, but upon a new creation, a creation that Jesus Christ ushered in through his Paschal mystery, which will never pass away. And it is here that we can enter into the deeper meaning of this commandment.
Of course, the Catholic Church claims that the change was her act, and the act is a mark of her ecclesiastical power and authority in religious matters. Letter from C.F. Thomas, Chancellor of Cardinal Gibbons on October 28, 1895. But you may read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and you will not find a single line authorizing the sanctification of Sunday. The scriptures enforce the religious observance of Saturday, a day which we never sanctify. Cardinal James Gibbons, The Faith of Our Fathers, Ayres Publishing, 1978.
The Sabbath is the seal of God. Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that doth sanctify you. Exodus 31 verse 13.
Those who have corrupted the law by substituting a false Sabbath for the holy Sabbath of God, and who compel the observance of this false Sabbath, exalt themselves above God, and honor the spurious above the genuine. Sanctification is claimed by professed Christians who ignore God's holy rest day for a spurious Sabbath, but God declares that the sanctification coming from Him is bestowed on those only who honor Him by obeying His commands. The sanctification claimed by those who continue in transgression is a spurious sanctification. Thus the religious world is deceived by the enemy of God and man. Men have sought out many inventions. They have taken a common day, upon which God has placed no sanctity, and have clothed it with sacred prerogatives. They have declared it to be a holy day, but this does not give it a vestige of sanctity. They dishonor God by accepting human institutions and presenting to the world as the Christian Sabbath a day which has no, thus saith the Lord, for its authority.
Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and share. God bless.